Hi, welcome to channel 16. In this short module, Risk Management 1, we shall discuss hazards. We have seen that there's a confusion at times in differentiating between hazards and consequences. In this short video, we will see what is a hazard and what is the importance of hazard identification in the risk assessment process. I'm your trainer for this particular session. We will soon see that hazard is also a non-conformity, and we will also try and understand how do we measure likelihood of a hazard or the probability of the occurrence of a hazard or the likelihood of the occurrence of a hazard. ISO 31000 is the ISO guideline for risk management. The latest version, as you see on the screen, is 2018. One can procure the standard from an ISO member nation or directly from ISO Geneva online. The price is almost the same. As a user, it is not necessary to procure the standard, but if required, it can be used as a reference document. Now, what exactly is a hazard? Hazard is a state or a condition which has the potential to cause harm, and thus it is also a non-conformity, an undesirable situation. So let's look at an example. Oil spill on deck causes decks to be slippery. So the slippery deck, that is a hazard, and it is also a non-conformity since oil spill should have been cleaned up in good time. Let's look at another example. We have engine room machinery maintenance. Often that's not done as per maker's recommendation or as per PMS requirements. This too is a hazard because that can lead to a breakdown on a machinery or whatever, and also a non-conforming state or a condition, right? Now, what exactly in risk assessment is the key issue? The key issue is identifying hazards. It's the most important step for conducting risk assessment, right? And what exactly is a hazard if we have to put it in very simple terms? What can go wrong in performing a task? So whether it's a person entering an enclosed space or somebody climbing the mast or tank cleaning operations or navigating in restricted visibility. So what can go wrong while performing that task? Now that's exactly a hazard. Identifying hazard is the key in risk assessment. A good hazard identification for a task, you can say that you've completed 90% of the risk assessment. So generally, the ship staff should focus more on what can go wrong, hazard identification. Now, new hazards can emerge from near misses within the organization or outside, or from industry sources or experience sharing, etc., maritime accidents and things like that. So, hazards emerge from unsafe acts such as use of uncalibrated gas meter to measure hydrocarbon content. So, you're likely to get a wrong reading. Navigating officers often bypass the safety alarms to avoid the noise on the bridge, and this may not be in line with the maker's recommendations or with the company procedures. Often, ship staff and maybe people in the office as well, use obsolete procedures or checklists, those that have already been revised. Now, that's also risky. Hazards emerging from unsafe conditions, the slippery deck due to oil spill. Maintenance has not been carried out as per PMS requirements. The machinery could break down. There could be problems with the machinery. Machinery is moving, but the guards and covers are not in place. Now, that's again an unsafe condition and a non-conformity. Now, hazards, are they finite or infinite? Hazards are infinite. Why so? We identify hazards, those that we know of or those that are foreseeable as of today. New hazards emerge with time based on near misses or new accidents. So you had a vessel going very close to the coast, seeking internet, and that landed up, grounding. So you have, new hazards that emerge with time. So when the hazard identification is done, it is done based on what we know, what are foreseeable, right? But we need to remember there's something called as the devil hazard. However good we may identify hazards, how many we may identify hazards in terms of numbers, there will always be a hazard which is like the devil, and that will remain hidden till it causes harm. When you discover that new hazard, there's another hazard, so called the devil hazard, in hiding. Thus, there is the need of assessing hazards or reviewing your risk assessments, as they say, on a regular basis. This could be 6 monthly, quarterly, and at the most on a yearly basis, or sometimes even earlier if the situation requires, based on near misses, industry feedback, or incidents. So, as we say, hazards are infinite, and thus the process is continuous. Identification of hazards, reviewing of your risk assessments. So we said hazards, what can go wrong in performing a task. Now, obviously, what can go wrong in performing a task, a senior would know better than a junior. So a superintendent with a few years of shore experience will know what can go wrong better than a newly joined superintendent or a juniorship staff. Thus, when it comes to identifying hazards, it should be done by a team and should include more experienced, whether it's the ship staff or the people in the office. The seniors have a better vision, more experience of what can go wrong while doing a task. Uh, and thus, the hazard identified will be meaningful, and uh, unfortunately, this is passed on to juniors. Now, if that does happen, then the hazards identified and quality of risk assessment is likely to be poor. So, what we need is a brainstorming session to identify hazards, and where seniors need to be involved more than the juniors. So, how do we measure hazard? Like we measure temperature in degrees Celsius and height in meters, or pressure in kgs per centimeter square. We similarly measure hazards in terms of their probability or likelihood of occurrence in a given work environment. It's very important that it's measured in a given work environment and the HSE standards in that work environment. For example, let's say not wearing proper PPE, safety shoes, helmet, etc., is a hazard. Now, the likelihood of this to occur in a substandard company is high, but in a company or a ship where the standards are high, the likelihood is likely to be very low, because the company maintains good standards, it's likely to be low. So you have low likelihood and a high likelihood of hazards. So here in the next two slides, you will see, in the first column, there are some hazards. In the next column, there's a low likelihood, where barriers are good, and there's a high likelihood where barriers are inadequate or not well implemented. And you can see how the hazard in a given work environment has a low likelihood, but in a given work environment it has a high likelihood. Similarly, here is the second one, and where you can see the hazards, the low likelihood and the high likelihood of hazards. This is the risk management module 1. There's another module, that's risk management module 2, where we will discuss what is consequences and how do we measure consequences. So you may proceed to risk management module 2 for consequences. I hope the presentation was useful in clearing doubts on hazards and likelihood of hazards. Please feel free to post your comments. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you.